These were the girls who were considered the most beautiful in the school, and their confidence filled the room. Amy stood in the midst of the students of East High College, her head bowed in shame. The echoes of the girls behind her, their mocking laughter and jeers, rang cruelly in her ears. Moments earlier, she had raised her hand to call for the head teacher's attention as he addressed the assembly. She desperately needed to excuse herself, but the head teacher had totally ignored her. After all, who cared about the fat, ugly student? Amy's weak bladder betrayed her. Warm liquid seeped down her legs. All eyes turned on her as Amy peed herself. The moment the boys noticed, their whispers turned into uncontrollable laughter. Soon, the entire assembly erupted in cruel mockery. Amy felt the ground beneath her feet shift, as though it threatened to swallow her whole. She wished it would. Tears streamed down her face as she turned and fled, seeking refuge in an empty classroom. There she collapsed into a desk, sobbing uncontrollably. Life had always been unkind to her. She had been born with a weak bladder, a condition that had plagued her with humiliation since childhood. On top of that, she was fat, poor, and, by the cruel judgment of her peers, the ugliest girl in school. Unlike her classmates who all had boyfriends to call their own, Amy had never experienced the thrill of a boy's affection or the joy of a friend's companionship. "Why did you make me like this, God?" she whispered through her tears. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them. Why? Amy's heart ached as she listed her grievances against life. It felt as though every curse had been heaped upon her, and she could see no escape. The door creaked open, startling Amy. She quickly wiped her tears, but it was too late. Miss Susan, her literature teacher, entered and approached her gently. "Amy," Miss Susan said softly, pulling up a chair. "Don't cry, dear. Those students, they're the ones who should be ashamed, not you." Miss Susan had always been different. She was the only person in the school who didn't judge Amy for her appearance. She saw something in Amy that others didn't. With a warm smile, Miss Susan handed Amy a handkerchief. "I have something that might cheer you up," she said. "I nominated you to compete in the school's end-of-year pageant." Amy's head shot up in shock. "Me?" she stammered, unable to hide the mixture of disbelief and hope in her voice. "But why?" "Because you're beautiful, Amy," Miss Susan replied firmly. "And you're worthy of competing, just like anyone else. You have a kind heart and a brilliant mind, and that makes you more than enough." For the first time in what felt like forever, Amy felt a flicker of hope. Miss Susan's words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, shielding her from the harsh cold of the world. She nodded hesitantly, a small smile breaking through her tear-streaked face. Deep down, she had always dreamed of being part of something as special as the pageant, even if she'd never admitted it to anyone, not even herself. Later that day, bolstered by Miss Susan's encouragement, Amy walked into the school hall where the other contestants were rehearsing. These were the girls who were considered the most beautiful in the school, and their confidence filled the room. Amy's hands trembled as she approached the arts teacher. Her heart pounded, but she steadied herself and spoke up. "I'm here to join the practice," she said, her voice wavering but resolute. The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned to her, wide with shock. Among them was Joan, the queen bee of their class, the one everyone knew was going to win the competition, the dream girl. She immediately strode forward to the spot where Amy was standing, her expression a mix of irritation and disdain. "Who asked you to be here?" Joan sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. Amy swallowed hard, willing herself not to cry. "I was voted in," she said quietly. "My name is on the list." Joan's eyes narrowed as she marched over to the arts teacher who had just walked away from Amy. She got the list of contestants from the arts teacher. After a quick glance, Joan's face darkened. Amy's name was indeed there. With a cold smile, Joan walked back towards Amy, still standing at the entrance of the hall. She tore the list to shreds before her, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. Amy's heart sank. She stared in horror at the fragments of paper scattered around her feet. "Well," Joan whispered venomously, leaning in close, "now your name isn't on the list anymore." The arts teacher turned away, feigning ignorance. The pageantry was the biggest event of the entire school, and Amy's presence in the competition was clearly unwelcome. No one was willing to stand up for her. "You can leave now," Joan said with a smirk. "Trust me, I'm doing you a favor." No one wants to see that face on stage. Laughter erupted around the room. The other girls whispered among themselves, their derisive comments piercing Amy like daggers. Her vision blurred with tears as she turned and ran from the hall, their laughter echoing in her ears. As she fled, Amy's heart felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. Joan's words replayed in her mind, each one a reminder of her deepest insecurities. She had always known Joan despised her, perhaps out of jealousy for her intelligence. But Amy had never imagined that Joan's hatred could manifest in such a cruel and public humiliation. Joan's hurtful words echoed relentlessly in Amy's mind as she sprinted home, her heart heavy with pain. The cruel taunts replayed like a haunting melody, each note piercing deeper into her soul. As she neared the familiar corner where the old madwoman sat, a figure Amy had faithfully shared bread with every day after school, she paused, hesitating for a moment. Despite her turmoil, compassion compelled her to stop and offer the old woman her daily share of kindness. The frail figure sat cross-legged on the ground, her grey hair tangled and matted, her eyes distant yet knowing. Amy extended the bread silently, hoping to leave quickly before her tears betrayed her. But today was different. "Why do you cry, my child?" The old woman's voice was raspy but surprisingly steady. Amy froze, startled. The mad woman had never spoken before. Her words carried a strange weight, as though they bore secrets far beyond her ragged appearance. "Life has been unfair to me," Amy blurted out, her voice quivering. "Everyone mocks me because I was born ugly. No one wants me." The old woman's eyes softened with an unexplainable depth of understanding. "Make one wish and I will grant it to you," she said gently. Amy's eyes fluttered open in shock. Was this a joke, or was the woman speaking out of her illness? How could an old mad woman grant her wish? "Why do you doubt me, child?" the woman asked, her tone almost hurt. "I hear your thoughts, but this is my gift to you for your kindness. Every day you feed me when others pass by without a glance. Speak your wish, and it will be yours." Reluctantly, Amy agreed, though her heart was filled with doubt. Just to humor the mad woman and be done with it, she closed her eyes and said, "I wish to be the most beautiful girl in the world." When Amy opened her eyes, the mad woman was still sitting before her, her lips curling into a mysterious smile. But nothing had changed. Of course she knew it was a prank, Amy thought. The old woman then said to her, "According to your wish, you have been granted 336 hours to be beautiful." Amy scoffed, almost laughing at the delusion. She bade the woman farewell, reminding her to eat her food and cover herself with sheets at night against the cold. But as she turned to leave, the old woman's voice echoed behind her. 336 hours to live your dream, my child, is not a very long time. Use it wisely." Amy shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "This mama is so funny," she muttered to herself. At least the old woman had managed to make her laugh and momentarily forget her troubles. That night, Amy went straight to bed, carrying her sorrows with her. When she woke up the next day, she began to feel different, lighter somehow. She walked up to her mirror, curious about the strange sensation, but when she reached the mirror, Amy almost fled from her own reflection. The girl staring back at her wasn't Amy. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. Her reflection was radiant, ethereal, every feature perfectly sculpted. For a moment, Amy didn't recognize herself. The madwoman's words rushed back to her. 336 hours. The impossibility of it all made Amy feel dizzy. Questions swirled in her mind. She wanted to go back, to ask questions, but the old woman's parting words echoed louder than her doubts. Her time had begun to tick. Amy made a choice. She would not waste this fleeting gift. The world had mocked her for so long. Now it would bow before her. With resolve burning in her chest, Amy vowed to use her beauty to avenge on every single soul who had ever made her feel less of a human. And her first target was Joan. With her revenge plan set in motion, Amy was ready to return to school that morning. That morning at East High, as Amy walked into school, the halls fell silent. Every head turned to her. The students' eyes widened with astonishment. Amy's presence commanded attention like nothing the school had ever seen. Whispers filled the air. "Who is that new student?" the students whispered among themselves. The girls looked at her with a mixture of jealousy and admiration, while the boys, the very same ones who used to mock Amy, tripped over themselves for a chance to speak to her. Amy didn't spare them a glance. She had one goal: Joan. As Amy stepped into her classroom, the chatter stopped abruptly. All eyes were on her. Boys scrambled to dust the seat she chose, their eagerness almost comical. Amy carried herself with quiet confidence, unbothered by the frenzy she caused. But from across the room, Joan watched intently, her brow furrowed. Who was this girl? Her aura was magnetic, her beauty unparalleled. Joan's throne, as the school's queen bee, felt suddenly unstable. During class, Amy answered every question with confidence, outshining everyone. By the end of the lesson, Joan had made up her mind. This girl wasn't an enemy to conquer, but an ally to recruit. A smirk played on Joan's lips as she decided to approach her. "If you can't beat her, make her one of your own," she thought. No one in class noticed Amy's absence from school, nor did anyone question the mysterious arrival of this stunning new student. During break time, Joan hurried over to Amy with an outstretched hand, her smile wide and inviting. "Hey, you're exactly the kind of girl I'd love to hang out with," she said warmly. Amy introduced herself with practiced ease. "I'm Jessie, the new girl," she said with a smile, masking her true identity and feigning innocence. Joan's eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Welcome, Jessie. Why don't you join my clique? We'll have so much fun before finals." Amy gave a small, polite nod, but as they walked together, she couldn't help the cruel smirk that tugged at the corners of her lips. If only Joan knew the truth, that the girl she now eagerly welcomed was the same ugly fat girl she had tormented relentlessly. The thought made Amy laugh inwardly. Joan had no idea what was coming. The next day marked the start of the final exams, a pivotal moment for all 6th grade students as it would determine who would graduate to East High College. The tension was palpable, and Amy knew many of her classmates, including Joan, planned to cheat. This was the opportunity Amy had been waiting for. Sitting alone in the classroom after everyone had left for break, Amy began crafting her plan, the pieces of her revenge falling perfectly into place. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hi, Jessie." She turned to find Tony, Joan's boyfriend, standing before her. Amy's breath caught, but she quickly composed herself. Tony, whom she had known since kindergarten, but had never spoken a word to her in all their years of school, now stood there looking at her like she was the center of the universe. "I noticed how you answered all the questions in class today," Tony said, his voice warm with admiration. "You're really smart." Amy's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "Jessie, the name's Jessie." Tony grinned. "Why'd you transfer here for your finals?" Amy thought fast. "East High College is my dream school," she said, flashing a casual smile. "I had to be here to take the entry exams." Tony nodded, satisfied with her explanation. That brief conversation marked the start of a secret friendship, one that Amy knew she could use to her advantage. She wasn't just going to destroy Joan, She was going to take everything she held dear, including Tony. The next day, the exams began. For Amy, passing was effortless. She had always been brilliant, even if no one had ever noticed before. But as expected, the other students resorted to cheating. Some scribbled answers on their palms, others on scraps of paper tucked into creative hiding spots. Amy's focus, however, was on Joan. In the girls' washroom, Joan showed Amy the test answers she had written on a sheet of paper. Amy watched as Joan slipped the cheat sheet into her bra. "No one will ever check here," Joan said with a sly smile. "You're so smart," Jessie replied, forcing a grin. They laughed together, and Amy followed Joan back into the exam hall. Everyone was seated and the exam began. After a while, Amy walked calmly to the invigilator and whispered something in her ear. Moments later, the teacher called Joan to the front of the class. "Joan, please step forward," the teacher said sternly. Joan's face turned pale. "What's wrong?" she asked, trying to sound innocent. "We've received information that you're carrying unauthorized materials," the teacher announced. Joan denied it vehemently, but when the teacher reached into her shirt, she pulled out the cheat sheet. Gasps filled the room. "Go and report yourself to the head teacher," the invigilator said, handing Joan the damning evidence. Joan's fate was sealed. Cheating was a serious offense at East High, and Joan's punishment was harsh. She would be held back a year to repeat her 6th grade, unable to graduate with her classmates. She was immediately sent home that day. Amy's satisfaction was unmatched as she completed her exams with a triumphant smile. At the end of the exam week, Joan cornered Jessie in the girls' washroom, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I trusted you," she shouted, her voice trembling with anguish. "How could you betray me like that? My dad collapsed when he heard what happened. He's in the hospital because of this. Don't you have a heart?" Amy scoffed, her expression cold and unbothered. "A heart? I only did what was right, which is something I presume you wouldn't know anything about." Amy paused, letting her words sink in. "Oh, and Tony asked me out," she added. Joan staggered back, her tears flowing freely. Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Amy leaned in, her voice low and venomous. "You did worse," she said, her eyes flashing with anger. "To those you thought were beneath you," she continued. "Remember that girl. Now, you know how it feels." She straightened herself, her tone icy. "Let's see how you'd win this year's competition. I'm pretty sure no one would want to see the face of a repeat student on stage," Amy said, and walked out. Joan stood frozen there, her own words ringing in her head. A million thoughts ran through her mind. The competition, the girl. Who was Jessie and who was the girl she was talking about? As the days passed, Amy's transformation brought her unimaginable joy. Tony became her boyfriend, and the school adored her. She basked in the attention, joining the pageant competition with Joan out of the way. But in her newfound glory, Amy forgot the one who had made it all possible. Going home with Tony every day, she no longer walked the road where the old madwoman sat. Her past and the kindness she once showed were left behind, replaced by a thirst for revenge and a hunger for admiration. Amy had forgotten one crucial thing. Her time was running out, and the dream she was living wouldn't last forever. The day of the competition finally arrived, and Amy was dominating, leading the scoreboard with a significant gap against her competitors. It was almost certain she would emerge as the winner and claim the title of the most beautiful girl in East High. Then came the final round, where each contestant had to answer a question. When Amy's turn arrived, the moderator asked, "Can you define beauty? What does it truly mean to you?" The room fell silent, and all eyes were on her. Amy stood frozen, her confidence evaporating. To everyone's shock, including her own, she couldn't answer. For all her outward beauty, she had never considered the essence of true beauty. As the weight of the moment sank in, Amy realized two things. First, in her quest for revenge, she had abandoned empathy and neglected the values that once mattered. Second, she'd become the very person she sought to defeat, Joan. Amy didn't know what beauty truly was because she had strayed too far from her own truth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the crowd, dropped the microphone and walked off the stage. Gasps echoed throughout the hall, but Amy didn't care. She knew exactly where she needed to go. She went straight to Joan's house. Joan was sitting outside, tears streaming down her face as she worried over her hospitalized father, who was now in that condition because of her bad behavior. Amy greeted her softly. She was sorry for what happened to Joan's father. "Joan," she said with regret in her voice, "I'm so sorry. For everything. I never meant to cause you and your family so much pain." To her surprise, Joan nodded, her voice trembling. "It's not really your fault, Jessie. I've been a bad student and a terrible person. I was proud and reckless, and I never should have cheated. All my dad ever wanted was for me to do well and be better. I failed him." Amy looked at Joan, her eyes brimming with understanding. "I understand," she said softly. "I've made many mistakes too, and I'm truly sorry for everything." Joan looked at her with watery eyes. "If you ever see that girl, Amy, again, please tell her that I am sorry." Tears welled up in Amy's eyes as she looked at Jessie. She replied, "Amy, we'll hear." The two girls embraced, finding solace in each other's repentance. Together, they visited Joan's father in the hospital, bringing him gifts and spending hours laughing and talking. At the end of the day, Joan's father called Amy aside. "Thank you, Jessie, for helping Joan," he said softly, his voice full of gratitude. "It was never just about her grades," he continued. "I was worried about the path she was on. I prayed for God to change her heart, and today I see the sweet little girl I once knew coming back to life. For that, I am deeply grateful." Amy, moved beyond words, held his hands tightly. "I'm the one who's grateful, sir. Your forgiveness and kind heart has given me a chance to make things right." Before she left, Joan's father called both girls to his side, blessing them and praying for their future. When Amy left the hospital, she ran straight to the old woman, with tears in her eyes, and hugged her. "Mama, please forgive me for staying away so long. I forgot about you and all that you did for me," she said, and handed the old woman a loaf of bread, as she used to. The old woman looked at Amy with a knowing smile and said, "Child, did you learn any lesson from being beautiful as you wanted?" Amy sat beside her, her heart full of humility. "Yes, Mama," she replied. "I learned that without the beauty of the heart, the outward beauty is nothing but a mask. The real beauty is the light that shines on the inside. It is a heart that feels, that is kind, that gives and loves unconditionally. That is what true beauty is." The old woman's eyes sparkled. "Your 336 hours are over, my child. You've earned the right to stay beautiful forever." But Amy shook her head. "No, Mama. The person I need to fight for is not Jessie, the girl on the outside, but Amy, the one inside. I want to see myself again." The old woman was taken aback. "If you reject this gift, there's no going back," she warned. Amy smiled. "I should have loved Amy from the beginning. I want to be me again." The old woman granted her wish, her smile tinged with pride. The next day, Amy stood before her mirror. For the first time, she didn't despise her reflection. She saw her true self. Intelligent, funny, and compassionate, and she was proud of who she was becoming. At the graduation ceremony, Amy walked in as herself, unshaken and self-assured. After the event, she approached Tony and broke up with him. "It's over," she said simply, and just walked away. Tony stood frozen, confused. Where had Amy come out from? And why in the world did she just break up with him? He had been trying to reach Jessie on the phone, but she was not taking his calls. Tony was heartbroken, and now this? Amy might be going mad, he thought to himself as he walked away, leaving to search for Jessie one more time inside the hall. As the ceremony concluded, Amy sat under a tree in the school garden. Suddenly, Johnny walked up to her. Johnny had been her classmate, one who barely spoke in class and always kept to himself. "Hello, Amy," Johnny said. "I wanted to ask if we could go on a date together." Amy was shocked. "A date? But I barely know you," she replied. "Don't worry about that," Johnny said. "I've known you for very long. Every day from my driver's car, I watched you give that old mad woman food. Since then, I have secretly admired you, and I was only waiting for the right moment. Now that we are done with school, I think this is the best time to ask you, will you be my girlfriend?" Amy could not find the words to say. Here was a guy, a rich, handsome guy, asking her out, with her real face on. Amy could not believe it. But it wasn't Johnny's attributes that made her heart flutter, it was his heart. "I'll think about it," Amy said, smiling, "but first I'll honor your date because you asked so politely." They both laughed, and Johnny ushered Amy into his driver's car, waiting for them. As they walked towards the car, Amy could not help but reflect on her life and what she experienced in the last couple of weeks. What she learned was that God was never unfair in the way that He made her, and she never truly had a problem. The only problem she had was not knowing her worth. Amy did not mind having a weak bladder. The more her mind was strengthened, the more she was in control of her body and even her weak bladder. Her own mind had caused her healing. Now she found love, peace, and the fulfillment of changing someone else's life. Her joy was full. "I am a beautiful girl with a prospective boyfriend and a strong bladder," Amy muttered to herself as they walked. She was finally whole, her heart mended and her spirit free. In the end, it was her kindness and the radiance of her true beauty that set her free. The lesson to be learned from this story is that true beauty is not found in outward appearances, but in the kindness, love, and authenticity that shine from within. Amy's journey teaches us that no matter how the world perceives us, our true worth lies in how we treat others and how we see ourselves. Her transformation wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about rediscovering and embracing the person she already was. When we choose humility over pride and forgiveness over resentment, we not only heal ourselves but also create a ripple effect of goodness in the lives of others. True beauty is the courage to be yourself, to love without conditions, and to make the world brighter by the light within your heart. This story reminds us that every person is created with purpose and worth, and sometimes the only thing standing between us and self-acceptance is the need to see ourselves through the eyes of love. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts on this story. Until we meet again, stay blessed, and I'll see you in our next story.